In this episode we introduce Murad's theory of the connections in the multiverse. This theory is based on dividing the relation between our Creator and us into 3 different spaces, each of which has its own time. Space A is the complete independent space of the Creator himself. Space B is the intermediate space and time between the Creator and his creatures, where every matter and order could be set through different communication channels such as scientific research, spiritual prayer, and even various types of messengers, known in religious understanding as angels or spirits, and in scientific discourse as aliens. Space C is the space and time we live in, with each planet having its own space C.
To explain the essence of this theory swiftly, let us suppose that I am a computer games maker. I have my own space A, where various tools are available to me to control things and deal with my computer system, the mouse, the keyboard, the sound system, the screen, etc. Space B would include the relative time that the players of the game I have created will inhabit while they are engaged with it, and also the program I have made for the game, such as the hints and updates that become available to users via the internet. We can clearly see that the internet is the world where I, the game maker, can interact with my users in an indirect way and in an equal manner. Yet everything would be relative to each user, depending on how many hours he spends playing the game each day, how much he is paying to get the latest updates, and how far he has advanced through the stages of the game. Space C is where the user lives while playing the game. It follows the time I have set for the game and the length of each stage, how many lives are allowed before the game is over, and the hints I give the player to proceed further into the game. As we can see from this example, my space and time as a game maker, Space A, is completely different from the space and time of the game player, Space C, so the player who is playing the game by thinking about me wouldn't think of the life of the game maker in the same way he that deals with the lives he is using inside the game as a player. Furthermore, Space B will be full of mutual relativity. If players in C love the game, they will be ready to pay more money for new updates, so that I in Space A will find myself obliged to fulfill the needs of my loyal clients. This give-and-take phenomenon takes place in Space B via the internet and the different methods of payment, updates and downloads.
Back to the real universe. Murad believes that God's space exists beyond the black holes and that at times he opens windows to Space B in order to interfere in and interact with the 2 spaces, B directly and C indirectly. Murad also believes strongly in travel through time, in the same way we go through the index of a large book. To get there we have to appreciate the borders and the edges of the Almighty, which up to now we know too little about. When Murad develops his theory further, one of his main aims will be how to relate it to time travel, for he believes that if we know the exact space and time God is using in his dealings with spaces B and C, then it might become possible for us to find the missing link that could help us to alter time as we know it today in Space C in order to move through different spaces and times.
God is the beginning and the end, the A and the Z. He is the point of departure and the point of arrival. That means that the only escape from his authority has to be through his permission, and that the only way to achieve independence is to reach the point of arrival. In order to do that, we have to understand clearly the path we have been traveling on from the beginning of our universe to the present day.
After studying the major archaeological findings over the years, Murad have come to the conclusion that the point of departure could be the same as the point of arrival. In other words, the point of arrival is flexible, it doesn't have a stable value or place. And that suggests that the point can get closer to us if we accelerate towards it, but can also get further away as we distance ourselves from it. Therefore our universe will keep expanding and contracting until the time when we and the point of arrival, or the point of return, move towards each other and meet. Our meeting will not mean the end of the universe, but it will be the declaration of our independence from the laws of time and gravity, our release from this mortal prison. It will be our eternity, the moment we are transformed into powerful free creators.
When we say the world has to evolve and move forward, we have to be sure that we are really moving forward towards the arrival point and not backwards away from it. Therefore the existence of us human beings did not start with the beginning of the universe, nor will our future independence mark the end of the universe.
To return to numbers, values, and the relativity of spaces and times, thanks to the efforts of scientists, particularly Albert Einstein, we know today that time and space are always related, and that they differ relative to the nature of every existing object or matter. According to the numbers given by ancient texts, 1 day in God's space, time equals 1,000 years of our space, time. If we apply this calculation to what many holy books agree on, that God created the universe in 6 days and then withdrew to his space on the 7th, then it took God 6,000 years of our time to create the universe, and another 1,000 years to get out of it. If correct, this information will also lead us to the conclusion that the last day of mortal humans, which some people call the day of resurrection and judgment, will not last literally 1 day of our time but 1,000 years. The same calculation will give us the duration of the final hour. 1000 divided by 24 equals 41.666 years. That means that in the 42nd year of that final period, the transformation will take place and people will become free creators or be sent to be recycled in hell, each in accordance with his level of ignorance, arrogance and bad deeds.
Now let us apply those numbers to Mrad's theory of connections in the multiverse. According to Einstein, the speed of light is constant at 300,000 kilometers per second through all spaces. The ancient texts say that creatures who live in space B could reach space A at a speed B, of 50,000 light years, Li equals 9.5 times 10 caret 12 kilometers. Let us name the distance from space B to space A, d bar. This gives us the following equation. D bar equals speed B. Li equals 5 times 10 4, 9.5 times 10 12, equals 47.5 times 10 caret 16 kilometers equals 475 kilolight years. D bar equals the distance that man needs to reach the edge of the universe once he gets outside the space sea of the Earth, meaning once he is outside the Earth's atmosphere. As we can see, this value is shorter than the comoving distance that cosmologists use today as the distance between Earth and the edge of the visible universe, which has a value approximately equal to 45.7 gigalight years. 45.7 times 10 9 times 10 12 equals 45.7 times 10 caret 21 kilometers.
Scientists think that dark matter and dark energy are different, and believe that the universe is constantly expanding in an accelerated manner. But Mrad thinks that dark matter and dark energy are the same. First of all, Mrad would rather call the dark matter the invisible matter. In his opinion, it is the basic content that fits the background of what he calls the space B. This matter is neither as solid as glue nor as fluid as water. It is heavy but fluid at the same time. Mrad also believes that it was there in space B before the Big Bang, when all galaxies, stars and planets took their places in the universe. During the first billions of years, it was stable. Then, when the Creator put the final touches to his universe, he set in motion a mechanical process to spread intelligent life that would evolve over time to produce other creators like himself. The principal components of this mechanism are the holes that connect space A with space B. Mrad would not call them black holes, but rather will give them the name holes ABA. The reason for this is because these holes have versatile roles. They are always in movement and in rotation, but function in only one way at a time. For example, a hole can be the channel through which invisible matter passes from space A to space B. After a while, the same hole can play a reverse role by pulling invisible energy back from space B to space A. This is again the point at which we say that everything begins with God and everything ends with Him too.
Let me explain better how Mrad sees the universe we live in. It's like a huge oval piscine or tube. This tube includes the space B and all the spaces C, and at the edges of this tube there are holes, which are the hubs of the energy that keeps the universe active. Yet in order to keep these vast spaces balanced, the mechanical process has to happen at different speeds. Thus, when a hole is playing the role hole AB by bringing invisible matter in, the flow must be slower than that of the invisible matter being driven out at the same time on another side of the tube, via another hole playing the role hole BA. Sometimes the opposite can happen, so that movement through a hole AB could be quicker than through a hole BA. The images that scientists have captured, and which they interpret as showing the universe expanding rapidly, could therefore have coincidentally captured the galaxy or a group of stars being driven by the invisible energy towards the supergravity of two or more holes BA. Yet all that is actually happening is that those same stars can return to B through another hole somewhere else. That is why we see planets or stars apparently coming to existence out of nowhere and others vanishing without a clue as to how they disappeared. When we see stars exploding, it means that their space C has been invaded by invisible matter. Because every star or planet contains highly combustible materials such as lava, when invisible matter makes contact with it, the star explodes. On the other hand, those that have a cold core will be crushed by the pressure of invisible matter like an egg in a man's hand.
Today's scientists are investing a great deal of time searching for clues about the existence of this invisible matter by examining any possible interaction between it and the visible matter present on Earth. Regrettably, this is a futile endeavor. Mrad believes that invisible matter is so thick and heavy that it can have no interaction with anything within the atmosphere of our planet. If that were allowed, the entire gravitational and rotational balance of the Earth would be shaken. Like all the other planets, we are protected by specific components in our atmosphere that prevent the invisible matter from penetrating our space C. The role of the invisible matter is to hold the spaces C together in specific dimensions and orbits designed by the great designer, so that no planet that holds life can collide with another. Yes, there are lives on the surfaces of other planets, but the creatures of those planets are invisible to us for the time being. Moreover, the conditions they require to exist are completely different from ours. They do not need the same quantities of oxygen and hydrogen, and they require higher or lower temperatures to survive. Some may ask whether we are really special. I would say that we are, but we are still ignorant, arrogant, and not thankful when it comes to believing that we are the products of a magnificent, super-powerful creator.
Many ideas have been suggested about the possibility of travel through time to the past or to the future. And although we still need to define how we could achieve this, there can be little doubt that travel in time is not only possible but attainable. If we do not simply dismiss all the ancient texts as myths, we can find many accounts of time travel in them. Among the best known that include human beings are the elevation of Enoch, a short adventure of Moses, and a one-night trip of Muhammad. And if you believe in the elevation of Jesus from the past and you are waiting for his return in the future, then you have to believe that such a phenomenon does exist.
The other common factor in all these stories is that none of these prophets was able to cross the time barrier on his own. There was always one or more messengers or angels involved. For they are the ones to whom God gave knowledge of the book of fate. They are the guardians of those who have a sincere and permanent connection with the divine, and have been blessed by the Spirit. These messengers are the inhabitants of Space B and the intermediaries between Space A and all the C spaces, including ours.
This book of fate, which exists only in Space A, is not much concerned with time as we know it, because within its pages our past, present and future already exist. Some would argue that if God has written our destiny, that means that we haven't been given free choice, and that he therefore has no right to judge us. The explanation is that, as described earlier, time in Space A is completely different from our time in Space C. God has told us through the texts brought down by his messengers that one day in his space is equal to 1,000 years in our space. Let us estimate that human beings have existed for 20,000 years. All those years equal only 20 days in God's time, so that in just 1 month of his time, God already lives all our past, present and future. The events of the life of a human being take up just a fraction of a second in Space A. That is why the story of each of us hardly takes one click from the Creator to register it in his mechanical system. We will explain this phenomenon in more detail in a new episode on DNA.
Some readers may object that it is unwise to build modern theories on ancient myths. Yet Isaac Newton, upon whose work much of our material and scientific progress is based, spent a considerable amount of time studying the Bible in an attempt to calculate the date of the end time.
Since it is impossible for us to see the past, present and future without being elevated to Space A, we have to find a way to attract the attention of the inhabitants of Space B, so that we can travel with them through time. It is possible that they may give us the clue we need to remake these trips on our own at a later stage. We must be careful, however, not to fall into a trap set for us by those other beings who share our Space C, but reside in a different dimension, the Jinn. They have no more idea how to achieve this than we do, and would lead us astray. If they were capable of helping, they could have helped themselves out of the space in which both we and they are trapped.
This is where it becomes necessary to find the missing link that connects the spiritual world to the physical one. The secret of such a connection lies in arriving at a definitive understanding of the spirit. Knowing the spirit and identifying those people who have the capability to attract it and get in tune with it will help us to cross these boundaries and advance our civilization towards final independence, towards eternity.
It is important here to distinguish the useful boundaries from the useless ones. Some people have already crossed the little boundary between the human dimension and that of the Jinn. The best that can be learnt from these creatures is tricks and magic. Even if one were lucky enough to find an intelligent, honest Jinn, the most that would result would be some invention, the usefulness of which is limited to the Space C in which we and these beings are stuck.
Scientists often wonder why time in our Space C goes in only one direction. Even if time varies between one region of the Earth and another, the clocks keep ticking forward. They ask if it's possible for time to go in the opposite direction, backwards. The answer is yes. Time's arrow could go backwards if the Creator decided to change the direction of movement in Space A, as that would affect the energy that activates spaces B and C.
We all know that our clocks tick forward in accordance with the movement of the Earth around the Sun. On Earth, we see the Sun rising in the east and disappearing in the west, and therefore our clocks revolve the way they do, and people grow up, age and then die. And everything around us goes from one state of being to another as time advances. The way the Earth moves around the Sun causes time's arrow to move in the direction it does. That also means that the invisible matter is moving between spaces B and A in a way that keeps the mechanism of the Earth and Sun going in its present manner. If God were to reverse the movement of invisible matter, the invisible energy in space B would start pushing the Earth to orbit the Sun in the opposite direction, and we on Earth would observe it rising in the west and going down in the east. The question is, would such a phenomenon force us only to adjust our seasons, clocks, routines and lifestyles? Or would we see older people getting younger and the dead coming back to life? To use an analogy, would the Sun operate like the spool of an audio or video cassette, with the Earth and everything on it moving backwards, like the contents of a tape being rewound to zero? Could such things happen? Why not? God can do whatever he wants.
This idea of reverse rotation not only raises the issue of the end of time, but also points to an opportunity that might allow us to travel to the past. To move into the future would require us to reach space A. To do that, we would have to travel at the speed of light, which is beyond human power unless, as mentioned earlier, we are assisted by the angels who inhabit space B. As far as traveling into the past is concerned, Mrad believes this could happen only at a singular, personal level. Look at our lives today, the way each of us lives personally in this world. As I write in my flat in London, I am not experiencing what taxi driver is seeing on a crowded New York street, yet we are both still living in the same earthly time cycle. So what would happen if my flat traveled into the past? When I stepped outside, I would see Muswell Hill the way it was at a specific time in history, but I would only be able to watch what's going on as we watch a movie. I don't believe that I would be seen by people, or be able to interact with them.
Earth travels around the Sun at a speed of 180,000 kilometers per hour, 30 kilometers per second. We have not yet produced a craft that can travel faster than the Earth. Although spacecraft can reach massive speeds at some distance in space, this is entirely dependent on the gravity of the planets around them. Any craft that could take us back in time and land us on our planet at some point in the past could not go randomly through outer space, but would have to follow the Earth's orbit around the Sun, in the opposite direction at a speed of at least twice 180,000 kilometers per hour in order to return to Earth before it was launched. And this remains practically impossible unless we lose our physical form and become light.
Our knowledge and science are insufficient to achieve a trip to our past, hence the necessity for help from the enlightened inhabitants of space B. Once more we must face the fact that we urgently need to find the missing link between spirituality and science. Look again at time in space A, and compare it with our time in space C. This gives us one possible reality, that in God's eye the now, the present moment, includes our past, present and future. If we take literally the account of Adam, Eve and Lucifer being expelled from spaces A and B and becoming trapped in C, then such an event must have happened barely few hours ago by God's time. This can lead us to the conclusion that the entire mortal test we are going through in order to become wiser and more knowledgeable takes merely a night and a day in space A. It is too short, and yet we complain and question the justice of our great Creator. We really are arrogant little creatures, aren't we?
Mrad believes that every tiny event that has occurred on our planet is recorded in space A, so that in order to visualize the slices of time of our space, something from space A must be activated. Mrad believes that every creature, humans, cats, dogs, insects, that has ever existed has every moment of its lifetime recorded in its DNA, so no one can deny their bad deeds on Judgment Day, but will watch their whole life unfold before them. And because the Earth is also a living creature, it too has such a recorded code. Maybe, if we could access the Earth's record, we could travel into its past. Yet its future won't be accessible because it has not yet been recorded at level C, it is only available at level A. The quantum physics, which is supposed to be built on the basis of luck, originates in the ability of the two parallel worlds in which we live to interact with each other in a mechanical process called entanglement. People, Animals and every other creature visible to the human eye share space C with a parallel world. Murad prefers to call it the shadow world, inhabited by the jinns and their related species. These two worlds interact with each other through specific dimensions, numbers and symbols. Yet the majority of human beings are unaware that such interaction is taking place, and have little interest discovering that parallel world. That other world has different rules and codes of existence from ours, which is why interaction cannot take place collectively. Instead, these creatures, which are invisible to us, can get in touch with some of us through very specific ways of communication. The interaction of and connection between the two worlds go on all the time, 24 hours a day, though we fail to see it. Yet we can detect this interaction if we observe the movement of the tiniest components of the space these worlds share, such as photons and electrons.
Some scientists ask why, when we throw an electron in one direction, we can't predict where it will land because it behaves like a wave instead of constant matter. The answer lies in the given characteristics of these two worlds and the different rules that govern the movement of particles in each. When I throw a particle that exists in both worlds at the same time, I will most likely fail to predict its point of arrival because it may go straight through the known dimensions of my world to land exactly where I intended, or it could flip through the dimensions of the parallel world to land at a point that, in my own world, would appear completely random.
Quantum mathematics and physics could make it possible for humans to transfer themselves from one point in space C to another in a blink of an eye. I could disappear from London and reappear in Rome or Tokyo, for example, on a cruise in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or at any other place. But such travel would require careful decoding of every tiny particle of my body, and any mistake would cause me to vanish from this world and leave me stuck in the parallel one. Scientists are working hard to build such machines, one for the point of departure and another for the place of arrival. It seems unlikely that such a transfer would ever be safe for humans, but it is quite possible that it could be used to move large objects, making it possible to transport a car from Hamburg to Beirut, for example, in a blink of an eye. This will require the know-how to control the jinn who live in the parallel world, because it is they who possess the ability to perform such tasks rapidly and effectively.
Why, then, should we not use the jinns to help us to travel into the past and the future? Unfortunately, this would be impossible, because, just like us, these beings are trapped in the now of space C like us. They can make brief visits to space B, but nothing more. We can therefore use them only for very specific tasks, and that can happen only after we have mastered them, which is not as easy as some might think. Historically, we know of one man who was famous for his ability to control and even enslave a jinn world, and that was King Solomon of Israel.
If scientists are trying to use the quantum leap here in space C to understand better what is happening in spaces B and A, they are unlikely to succeed, because the minute particles of space C are different from those of spaces B and A, and it is highly likely that they are also different from the particles of other spaces C.
So any quantum energy we could master in the future would be useful only in our space C. The invisible matter of space B is certainly different from the invisible matter here on Earth. Even if Solomon had the powers attributed to him, he died just like everybody else before and after him. He knew very well how to control space C during his lifetime, but that is all. This was the highest level a man had reached in mastering the space given to him by his creator. Why then did he fail in the end, dying without being able to reach eternity? Because Solomon was selfish, and wanted everything for himself. He even asked God not to allow any man after him to attain the power he once possessed. So Solomon failed the test, or at least the most important part of the test, which was the moment when he had to decide whether to make his powerful knowledge useful for the Earth's entire population, but instead kept it only for himself. That's why the dream of a man who can unify humans and jinn and lead them to build a world of peace and harmony, living in thankfulness to their creator, will remain a dream until a more collectively wise generation arrives to make it a reality.